Welcome to Making Disciples. I'm here today with Rob Peabody. Rob leads Vomo, which I'm going to get into talk about in a little while, and he started the Awaken movement. And Rob, I met you a number of years ago when you lived in the UK. God's called you back to the US to lead Vomo. Just tell us very quickly, what is Vomo?
Yeah, Vomo stands for Volunteer Mobilization. So it is a tech resource platform that is in the App Store and also on the web, and it connects needs and communities with churches and believers and even kingdom business people, universities to go meet those needs. So it's a technology platform to help us really live out our faith in our everyday life.
Now, at the moment, it's only available in the US.
Right?
Is it going to come to the UK at some point?
It is. That is the plan. We actually were going to launch it just a month ago in the UK, but I'm getting all the kinks ironed out in America before I bring it to the Brits.
Yeah.
And but yes, sometime in the next year we will be there. And I'm really excited to just be able to resource all the churches and all our friends. I say back home because I feel like it became my home before we moved back over here. And so it'll be there in the next year. So it'll be fun.
So what I want to talk to you about today is I guess, is two things. One is around the discipleship question, and the other is a bit around technology, because you've been trying to pioneer how you mobilise the church. So on Making Disciples, we talk about activating our minds, having our hearts healed and restored and being passionate like Jesus, and then mobilising our hands. So what you're doing is discipleship of the hands. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. But before we get into that, can I ask you this question? Who have you learnt the most from about discipleship? Who have you learnt the most from?
Apart from you?
Yeah.
I'm serious about that. There have been a handful of guys, probably three in particular, who have just really discipled me and intentionally built a relationship with me and been there for me throughout my, I guess, probably since university on. And I would say I've learned more about discipleship from them than I have from any book or any teaching or seminary or theology school, because it's life on life, and it's just an older guy investing in me. It's complicated, it's messy, it's hard, it's not glamorous. They spend their money, they sacrifice their time, but that has been so formative. And I can tell you specifically about each one of them if you want me to, or that's the big idea.
Yeah. So, what is it about one of them that for you has just been the most helpful for your personal walk with Jesus?
Yeah. So a guy that a guy named Robert Turner, who met him when I was in theology school. He was, he's 15 years older than I am. He was very much there as I was dating Medea. He actually performed our wedding, and then ultimately he's the guy that I moved to London to church plant with up there in Northeast London. And the thing about him, though, I think is he is a discipler. He's been discipled before. He gets it. He understands it. But I also think it's part of just his wiring and the way that God has gifted him, where he thoroughly enjoys sitting down, talking life on life, interjecting wisdom, his experience. Am I crazy? Is this how things go? And he'll just work you through it. And I would say that just doing that, but then also spending time with one another has developed a lot of trust, where I can go to this guy and just speak about really anything that's going on, and know that I'm not going to be judged, but I'm going to be loved and listened to. And then really the biggest thing is pointed back to Jesus. Something that's interesting is whenever I hang out with him, even today, I'll go home and Medea, my wife, she's like, "You've been hanging out with Robert, haven't you?" Like, she can just tell, because it's I guess my attitude is changing. It's pointing me back to Christ, and it's affecting who I am. And so, that makes me think of the Apostle Paul, where it's like, I'm going to go follow Christ, follow me, here we go. And now that I say it out loud, that's a really a good thing to say about somebody.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, I heard you preach a little while ago at something we were at together, and you said that discipleship has to be worked out on the streets, not in the pews. And I've heard you say very similar things to that as well. In fact, you've got a little phrase I've heard you use a few times. What is it? Tell me more about that. What is it about working out our faith on the streets that is more important than working it out in the pews?
Yeah, I think totally. This is a hot topic for me, but I think that if our faith only exists inside the walls of the church, that we have a weak faith that is not being transformative, not only inside of us, but also in the relationships and community in which we engage in. So if the whole point is just learning more about God and becoming, smarter sinners per se, then I think a lot of us, we can do that, right? Like we can go read books and get resources and study up and quote things. But the hard part is when that actually translates, just like you say, down into the heart and changing our affections and our motivations, but then actually the outworking of that is into the way that we live, right? And so the point of the Bible and the point of Jesus' message is that it's going to transform everything about us and then change radically the way that we go and live. And so I would say that discipleship and following Jesus, if it's not naturally going that progression, that we've got some sort of block, and that is unhealthy, and it's actually spiritually deforming, because rightly worked out, this is going to change how we live. And so for me, my ministry, our calling, the vision God's given me is nothing more than to help equip people to understand their identity in Jesus, and that discipleship start taking place, and then they go work it out. And that's how you're going to see revival, because you got all these believers who are transformed by Jesus who then go live it out. So
I like the idea of the church just being educated sinners.
I
like that very much.
Because it's obedience, right? It's not just knowing things. It's how does that, so what? What does that do in your life?
I think we would say that Jesus says, love the Lord your God with your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. It's the whole of who you are. And there's a danger, isn't there, when our discipleship is based in the pew, becomes listening to a speaker, we educate our minds, but unless it moves to a heart that's passionate and aligned with Christ, and a life that is activated, lived out with our hands, he calls it your strength, then actually you're going to be a wonky Christian. You're a Christian with a big head and really tiny hands. In fact, it's like being a dinosaur. You're a T-Rex, a massive head but tiny hands. Yeah. So I want to ask you, just want to push into this a little bit more. Why is it that you are so passionate about helping the church get out of the building and serve their neighborhood? Why are you so passionate about that? A moment ago you said, "Oh, this is my thing."
I'm so passionate because, all right, I believe it. I'm wired as an activist. I get that. I care about the why of things and how we actually live it out. But I think the biggest thing for me is my experience. And you know this, but I, was pastoring a mega church here in the buckle of the Bible Belt in America, in Dallas, and I have thousands of people, but then not seeing the impact. If you get that many believers together, things should be changing, right? Not only in your life, but also in the local community and around the world. And I think God really grabbed a hold of me at a young age and said, "Hey, here's a holy discontent that I'm going to put inside of you that is spiritually, seed sown inside of you that you've got to do something about." And it's got to get beyond us just playing church. And even as clergy and professional Christians, our goal is to equip the saints to go live in transformation and to be Jesus' hands and feet out there and a witness both in proclamation and in deed. And if it gets reduced to just doing the church building and doing the worship and the service, then really we've only understood half of what Christ died for us to go do. And so I really, for me, it was a holy discontent in that. It was realizing I had a blind spot in our local community. It was realizing that there's a big responsibility as a follower of Christ and also as a Christian leader to lead other people, that we have to understand and see, beyond just what's in front of us inside the walls of the church, but actually into a hurting community to be the hope of Jesus.
Yeah. That's great. I want to just move into talking a little bit now about discipleship and the digital stuff. I think one of the things that I've loved about what you are doing with Vomo is you're trying to activate discipleship digitally. So I want to just talk a little bit about millennials, and it's pretty obvious here in the UK, and I think emerging in the US, is that the church has a problem with millennials and discipleship with millennials. Why do you think the church is struggling so much at the moment to engage with millennials?
I would say because of, so there's a good thing about an inherited system, right? Of the tradition of the church and the way that we do things, and in Scripture, and those things need to be embraced. And it's been the saints before us who God has worked through His Spirit to deliver to us the ways that we do things, and a lot of the beliefs that we have, and how to interpret that from Scripture. But I also think the bad side of an inherited system is that if we do things the way we've always done things, and then expect different results, that's the definition of insanity, right? And so I think I've really learned, and that God has really impressed upon me, is that I think He gives us cultural moments where we right now find ourselves in a digital age cultural moment, where the average person checks their smartphone 200 times a day. Millennials spend 9 hours in front of a screen now today. I read last week that the average person touches their smartphone 2,600 times a day, and a super user said touches is 10% of the population over 5,000 times. And so
Super
it's like,
user.
Yeah, super user. Not anybody we know, but super users. But if that's true, and this is the cultural moment we find ourselves in, I think as the people of God, we need to read culture, realize what's happening, and then take the truths of Jesus and the reality of the gospel and allow that to intersect so that we can go out and be a real, relevant, tangible witness, speaking the language of culture, but infusing it with the truth of Jesus. And so for me, if that's where millennials are, and if that's where the church is, that's what we've got to be doing. And unfortunately, if we just inherit the system we've always had and don't think about it and just apply that on top of culture, a lot of times we're not going to get the real infusion that we really need, because I feel like our theology and our theology is sending us out, not just instituting our traditional systems on top of folks.
Can I be a little provocative and ask you this? Is it not just that millennials are lazy consumers and they want everything done for them? What would you say in response to that? Is that a fair comment, or do you think actually that's unfair?
I think it's true in some sense, but it's true for all humanity, right? I don't know. I kept talking to them, and I'm like the generation of like between the oldest millennial ever and the youngest Gen Xer ever. So I can go both ways. But when I start getting on this millennial talk with folks, I start saying all that, they're like, well, that sounds like everybody. Like our generation did that, and the one before it did that, and we're all lazy and self-centered and selfish, and we want things on our terms, and that's called being human in an unregenerate state, right? Yeah. But yeah, I think that there are a lot of good things about millennials as well, and if we can embrace and understand what those are, and the more we're a student of that culture, then we can speak relevantly into that. So I don't know, I'm not like the millennial expert, but I do. And there's a lot of negative things, I guess, about every generation. Yeah. But if that's, the largest workforce now today is millennials. So we need to figure out, how do we take the realities and truth of Jesus and talk about that in a contextual, relevant way with them?
I was listening to a seminar you gave at Spring Harvest a number of years ago on the digital medium and millennials.
Oh, yeah?
And you did this with Dot Tyler.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that you were really challenging the church on in that seminar was, you said that actually the millennials have got a lot to offer the church, in that millennials are activists and they ultimately want to change. They want to see the world change. That they've got this discontent. They're not happy, but it just needs to be harnessed, and it needs to be used, and it needs to be empowered. And there is a sense in some millennials of feeling disempowered, that the institution has not given them the power. And you were talking about needing to give the millennials the power to be that provocative, prophetic voice of the church. Which kind of leads on to this question I have, is that what is the effect of the digital revolution on discipleship? not just on millennials, but on the church. You are wanting to mobilize a generation of Christians using the digital medium. So what is the effect of the digital revolution that's positive for discipleship?
Yeah, so the effect is that for the first time in the history of the world, in the majority population in the Western world, which is who we predominantly deal with, we have access to them and they're touching their mobile device 2,600 times a day. So they're looking at screens 9 hours a day, right? Like you have to look at a screen to work, to be productive, to buy groceries, to do anything, and
to Skype.
Yeah, exactly. We are living proof of it right now. And so to do that, I'm all about wanting to leverage where we're at. And so if that's true, and this is where we are, and we actually have the ability to engage with these folks, then the question is not how do we do this to make better profit or to be better capitalists or to line our pocketbooks, but how do we do this for the glory of God? How do we use this to expand the kingdom? And I feel like this is a I was a part of this thing called Q with Gabe Lyons, and we were talking about cultural moments. It's a thing here in the States, and I think they do it internationally as well. But if God has given us this moment in time, how as Christians in this digital age can we take it, look at it, and seize the opportunity for the glory of God and the expanse of the kingdom? Yeah. And so for me, it's a huge opportunity. It's not a negative thing. It's not a we are distracted, and yes, people can jump on devices anytime they want. But I think the better question is how do we leverage that? And it's about wholly leveraging for the church. And so just insert discipleship into that. And so projects like what you're doing right now, a lot of things online, things with apps and technology, we've got to be a relevant cultural witness and not just leave that to quote unquote secular society who's pushing their agenda, and us just being on the wayside.
Yeah,
so I don't know. Completely
no, that's good. I think Jesus says in Acts 1, doesn't he? Go and be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. Well, there's nothing more the ends of the earth than the digital world. Jesus could have said, go be your witness in the local church, your local community, on your online community, and to those that you'll never meet across the world. I'd look just by asking you one question: where have you seen the local church using the digital world really well to mobilise discipleship? Have you seen something, particularly in the US, that could be really useful out here? I mean, out here, that makes it sound like we're ends of the earth.
I've seen it with some different ministries. I mean, there's one here called Right Now Media that are friends of mine who are putting Bible study content literally on a app or web device, and then churches, they are empowering their people and resourcing them to go study Christian teachings and to have small groups about it. And so, it is equipping people to go have community groups. And I mean, it's what we're trying to do, or what we are doing with Vomo. It's literally going to a church service, the pastor staying up front saying, hey, you're all convinced of the why of the Great Commandment and Great Commission. Like we get it, right? And it's all up here like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
But I think you're stuck, and this is how we're going to go live it out. Open up your phone right now. Here's all these opportunities to go be the church outside the walls of the church. So I think when churches are using platforms and resources that a lot of really intelligent people have put together, it just furthers the mission of the church beyond just sitting in the pews and really living it out. And so some cool things that we've seen locally, one of them's coming up here in April. There's a conference that we're doing out in Nashville, and as part of it, we're saying we don't want to just continue the discussion and the education, but we want to move this to the obedience. And so we've uploaded all these projects locally because we believe that when thousands of Christians get together in one spot, they should leave a difference. They should make a difference while they're there and leave a footprint of justice and evangelism behind them. And so we're trying to empower and fuel movements like that and opportunities like that to really make the church famous.
That's amazing. Hey, Rob, we're going to cut it there, but thank you so much for spending some time with us. I heard a rumour that Billy Graham passed away sadly really recently, and I heard that you got to go to Billy Graham's library a number of years ago. Is it true that you smuggled your book Citizen into Billy Graham's library, true or false?
True, and it's on the front says, Trust me, you will love this book, Chris Rogers. I also smuggled into a few pubs there in London too. So
Nice.
if you frequent some in Wanstead, you might find a book.
Hey, Rob, thank you so much for spending this time with us, and maybe we'll do this again sometime. Thank you.
Thanks, man.